are stories that connect us to ourselves and each other. These stories reveal who we are and show us the many vivid, wild colors of our truth. Welcome to Soul Wanderings, where we raise spiritual awareness and foster connections through these shared stories and personal experiences. And now, exclusively on KGRA Radio, I give you your host for Soul Wanderings Radio. Here's AJ.
Hello, welcome. You are listening to Soul Wanderings here on KGRA Radio. We are here every Wednesday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, wandering with a new guest each week about their authentic journey through this human experience. And I am AJ Rasmussen. I'm an owner and a manager of a heart-centered healing space called Vibes, where I get to assist others in matters of the mind, body, spirit, and the heart. And I am also your host of Soul Wanderings. Hello, Wanderers. Happy New Year. I'm so excited to be here tonight. Our show is sponsored by Vibes, Mind, Body, Spirit, and Vibes has a plethora of classes almost on the daily, as well as openings for one-on-one sessions for different types of energy work, coaching, readings, and other healing and growth opportunities. There's also a retail shop that offers different types of tools like crystals and stones, divination, smudging supplies, and a lot of other magical things. And at this time, there's a tiny online store for you to visit if you are outside the area. And Vibes will be expanding their online selection here soon in this new year. But for now, be sure to check out online vibez.com. That's onlinevibes.com. And if something calls to you at this time, be sure to use the coupon code KGRA for 15% off your order. And Wanderers, I am over in the chat room tonight, and you can be there with me and other Wanderers as well by going to kgraradio.com/chat. The chat room is a place where you can visit with other Wanderers throughout the show. You can also ask questions. And if you do find yourself wanting to ask questions, you may do so there and type them in caps so I can see them easily. And if time allows, I will ask as many as possible to our guest this evening. Tonight, we are wandering with a new guest. Her name is Nancy Rynes. And Nancy is an author, a keynote speaker, a spiritual teacher, and an artist. She has written 2 books, Awakening from the Light, as well as Messages from Heaven. She's been featured on The Today Show, several radio shows, and many other platforms similar to ours here on Soul Wanderings. She's been sharing her experiences from a near-death experience, which we'll refer to as an NDE. She is a leading voice for developing our heart-centered intuition and living a life of inspired creativity. Welcome to Soul Wanderings, Nancy. We're delighted to have you here this evening.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, and Happy New Year to everyone.
Yes, Happy New Year. How do you feel about New Year's?
Well, I feel really good about this one in particular. 2018 was for me a year of transformation, and I think this year a lot of things are coming together. I can already feel it, but New Year's are new promises, and to me, I look at it kind of like a blank canvas. If I look at it as an artist, it's a blank canvas waiting for me just to get in there and start painting on. So I can't wait.
That's a great way to look at it. I feel the same exact way. A blank canvas. We get to create whatever we decide to design.
That's right.
It's beautiful. So Nancy, I introduced you with these titles, but of course you're so much more than that. And this next 2 hours we'll be journeying with you to learn more about you as an individual and about your near-death experience, which you seem to be sharing quite a bit.
Yeah. It's for me, as we get into it, a lot of people will think that, whoa, that's really traumatic. But for me, it was a really huge blessing in my life. I know that might sound crazy for someone to say they came to almost dying, but that it was a blessing. But it is, and it's a blessing for me to be able to share what I learned with anybody who wants to listen. And it's okay if this doesn't affect you, or you don't have a takeaway from it. That's cool. I just want to share what I experienced, and I appreciate you, AJ, for giving us this platform to do that.
Thank you. I'm happy that you reached out to want to be here.
Yeah.
So first of all,
yeah.
tell me a little bit about yourself before you had this experience. Like, who were you and what was your life like? What were your beliefs? Things like that.
Well, I grew up on a small family farm in northern Illinois. We grew hay and sold hay for other folks in town, and we had, I think it was probably about 350 acres, so not really huge by Midwestern standards. But I grew up on a farm working my little buns off, as a kid, and baling hay and taking care of the cattle and that kind of thing. And we were also Catholics, and so I was raised in a Catholic faith. I did have, I would say, a modicum of faith when I was a kid. I just basically inherited it from my parents. I didn't think a lot about it. But then as I got older, and so I'm of that age, I was born in the mid-60s, and about the time I was getting old enough to really put some thought into this whole religion thing, there was a lot of scandal in the Catholic Church, and that was the first time that I started to turn away from the faith. And because I was a kid, because I didn't know any better, I also turned away from everything spiritual, not just a particular religion or a particular, pastor or anything like that. I turned away from spirituality in general because I felt it was all lumped together into this, the whole priesthood scandal that went on back in the late 80s and early 90s. And so for me, that was I had one of those times where I thought, well, how could, if there is a greater consciousness, if there is a God, how could he or she allow this kind of thing to happen? And that really coincided with me then also going off to university and choosing to study the sciences. And in doing that, as a scientist, you're really taught not only the scientific method as part of your rigorous training, but you're also unconsciously taught how to be a skeptic. And I don't mean just a normal questioner, which I think is good for everyone to question, but to be almost blatantly atheistic and anti everything that is an atheism. So I became really I won't say a dogmatic atheist, but I became a fairly strong atheist, which lasted really until this experience. There were times when I really wanted there to be something more than just this physical life. But I never really saw that evidence for it, like a good little scientist would want to see. Mm-hmm. So I just didn't go there. It didn't really necessarily scare me. It was just something that didn't seem right. I can't measure it, so it doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. Even though during that time I was terrified of death. I spent most of my adult life, those years, being absolutely terrified that consciousness just ceased to function, at the end of the physical life. So that's really how I spent most of my adult life. I was a scientist. I did a lot of science writing. and a lot of technical writing. I did a lot of work with Boeing and in the Renton, Washington area, and I did a lot of work for companies in Colorado that did like mining engineering and software for mining and that kind of thing. So it was really very technical, very scientific, and which was nice because it distracted me from all of that spiritual stuff.
Yes, we're good at that.
I didn't have to think about it.
As it happens, I feel like a lot of us do that when we don't know the answers, or maybe are even afraid to know the answers. We go on autopilot or distract ourselves in some way.
It's easy, that's the easy way out, really. For me, it was the easy way out anyway. I didn't have to do anything. I just basically dissed anybody who wasn't like me, who didn't believe the same as I did. But it was funny because at the same time, it was like I was hiding my head in the sand, like the proverbial ostrich, because I had a really, in hindsight, an amazing experience when my father passed away, which we can talk about in context a little bit later. But there was what now I know is called a shared death experience I had with him as he died. And so I could have chosen at that point, to start waking up spiritually, but it was again one of those things that was so outside of my wheelhouse that I couldn't deal with it. I couldn't go there. And so that's really how I lived, at most of my adult life, in this weird state of non-belief, but yet terrified of the final chapter of physical human life, until I was face to face with it almost exactly 5 years ago today. So in fact, tomorrow is my 5-year anniversary.
Really?
So
wow.
Your timing is good. Yeah.
And your life is completely different now, I would imagine.
Yeah, basically from the ground up. I'm lucky in that physically I'm good. Physically sound. I physically healed very well from all of what you're about to hear. But psychologically, spiritually, everything has changed from the ground up. My belief system is completely different. My outlook on life is different. I am incredibly at peace all of the time, which is before I was anxiety ridden all of the time.
That's quite the contrast.
To go from being anxious and fear driven all of the time to basically just like being in this peaceful, loving, kind of in the flow state all of the time. That's a huge shift for me. And if it just stopped there, I would be very appreciative. But there were a lot of other things that came out of this experience.
So it would be safe to say you're no longer afraid of dying.
No, I'm not afraid of dying. In fact, now it's kind of funny because funny in an interesting way, but one of the things that feels good to my heart and is a calling for me is to help other people in their passing. So instead of being terrified to be around anyone who was ill or dying, now I feel like it's a sacred duty to be there and help. So that's completely different too. Yeah, a lot of changes.
I really want to get into your experience from 5 years ago until now. We break here in about, just about 10 minutes, so I don't want to cut it off like right in the middle of it, although that would be a nice, factor of keeping everyone on their toes.
Right. Well, I'll just start off and we'll see where we end up at the break. So,
Perfect.
5 years ago tomorrow, so January 3rd of 2014, at that time I was living in near Boulder, Colorado, not actually in Boulder, but just outside of Boulder. And there in the winters there are actually pretty spectacularly beautiful. It was dry and beautiful, sunny, 60 degrees, I think it was that day. And I decided to do my normal thing. I went out for a bike ride in the morning. I had several days off over the holidays for work, and this was the last of my days off from work over the holiday. And so I went out for a bike ride in town to run some errands, and which is normal. I mean, everybody there bikes. It's like the biking capital of Colorado. So this wasn't unusual. But I went out on a bike ride, left at 10 in the morning or something, or excuse me, yeah, it was about 10 in the morning, and just started biking around town and came into a brand new traffic circle, just about a half a mile from where I lived. And it hadn't been in my mind, it hadn't been designed with bicyclists in mind, because there was a bike lane coming into it, and then there was a bike lane on the other side. But in the traffic circle itself, there was no bike lane, so you kind of had to merge with traffic. And so I did that, and it was fine because there was a guy that was respectably behind me in his little Subaru, and I noted that there was some traffic that was coming in to the roundabout from a road to my right. And at first it looked like those cars were going to stop, but then really at the last moment, I realized that lead car actually wasn't stopping. And in fact, she was accelerating into the traffic circle, which was illegal. She was supposed to stop. And I couldn't get out of the way fast enough because there was a guy behind me. And I tried to, as she came up and impacted me on my right side, I tried to push off, with my hand and get out of her way. And that didn't work. So I was terrified at that point. And at that point, I was also running on instinct. I remember everything that happened. I just don't know how I made the decisions that I made, in those moments. So I ended up somehow up on the hood of her vehicle. I don't know how that happened. I somehow flipped up off my bike and was on the hood of her SUV looking in at her. And she was texting. She had her cell phone up on her steering wheel as she was texting. And she didn't see me. I'm here. I'm like freaking out. She
still wasn't paying attention.
No, she didn't. She
That's
wasn't
incredible.
looking at even her own vehicle, and didn't see me staring at her from like 2 feet away or whatever it was. So at that point, I couldn't believe that this was continuing to happen. Right? I'm like, don't you see me? Can't you stop now? It would have been fine had she stopped at that point, but she didn't. She kept driving, and I couldn't hang on any longer. So I ended up falling off the front of her SUV, and I hit the pavement. And as I hit the pavement, something really weird happened, at least weird in my mind at that time. I noticed that my consciousness was in two places at once. And nothing in my scientific training up to that point had prepared me for that, because your consciousness can't leave your body, right? So at least the scientists will tell you that. So here I am hitting the pavement, noticing that I'm experiencing things from two physically different locations as she's continuing to drive. She still didn't know that I was there. And as she drove over me, so I was in between her front wheels, so I didn't get run over by her wheels, but I was in between. And something, I think it must have been my backpack strap, got caught on the undercarriage of her vehicle. And so she was dragging me underneath. as she's driving around this traffic circle. And, the part of my consciousness that was still in my body was terrified. I mean, as you can imagine, absolutely terrifying to be dragged underneath of a car for however, it was at least 50 feet. May have been more, but the police said it was at least 50 feet. But I was I was terrified that I would get run over. I didn't know what I was going to do if she didn't stop. I was just trying to hang on as much as I could so that I wouldn't get run over. But the part of me, there was a very distinct and different part of me that was outside of this accident. And, you could call it my higher self, my soul. The chaplain called it my soul. Whatever, that watcher part of me, that higher part of my consciousness that continues on, was watching all of this and was very contemplative, very quiet, very calm and centered and peaceful. And she kept that part of me kept telling my human self, this is very traumatic and very painful, but don't worry, everything is going to be okay. This is the way it's supposed to happen. This is what, part of what you signed up for, basically. This is part of your journey. And I had it wasn't really kind of an argument. It was an argument. I had an argument with myself. Like, wait, what are you talking about? This is horrible. That was my human self, that human part of me. So there was a struggle between that higher consciousness, my higher self, and that human self, that what was going on here was awful and it wouldn't be okay. Everything was very traumatic. And that's where it stayed until one of the witnesses drove his vehicle in front of hers to stop her, because he had seen what happened. He knew that I was being dragged underneath, and he pulled his vehicle around and physically put it in front of her so that she couldn't drive anymore. And that's what stopped all of this. And at that point, when the vehicle stopped, I started to wiggle out, from underneath of the car, underneath of the SUV. And that's when I started to get the feeling that something wasn't right with my body. I couldn't move the way I expected to be able to move, and I was in a lot of pain. And I still wanted to get up and run away. That was my... Right. That instinct is to get up and flee the scene.
Right. So were you out of your body per se watching this happening? Was that the other self of you watching the whole thing take place?
Yeah, I was in both. I was experiencing both vantage points at the same time, which is, some people call it bilocation.
Yeah.
It was really, for me, the first glimpse that I had that we do have a higher eternal consciousness, and that it's attached to our body for a while, but it isn't our body, So I was able to get both of those vantage points at the same time.
Right, but with all of the chaos, I'm sure you weren't realizing everything. You weren't piecing it together. That's what was happening. This is obviously all hindsight.
Right. Yeah. At the time I was thinking, that's really weird. I don't know what that's all about, so I'm not even going to think about it.
Yeah. This is a really good place to stop and have a break. Wow. That's quite a story already, but I know that it gets even more profound, which we look forward to hearing more about. We're going to have a quick break and have a word from our sponsors. And when we return, we'll hear what happened next. Hello, welcome back to Soul Wanderings. I'm AJ, your host, and our sponsor this evening is Vibes, Mind, Body, Spirit. Vibes has a bunch of happy, feel-good products to assist you in your spiritual journey. Be sure you guys check out online, vibez.com, and don't forget your coupon code KGRA at checkout for 15% off your entire order. Tonight we are wandering with Nancy Rynes, and before the break, Nancy began sharing with us the very beginning of her experience, which, Nancy, it was pretty traumatic what you were experiencing in that moment. Especially, I can imagine the confusion that was happening all around, the chaos.
Yeah, it was certainly, for me, painful, obviously physically, but I had never experienced an accident before like this, a traumatic accident of any kind. So this was all new. I'd never even broken a bone in my body up until that point. So I had no clue what was going on. And then to throw on top of this, that experience of bilocation or dual consciousness was just like one more thing that I couldn't deal with. And so when we left for the break, I explained that, I was kind of experiencing consciousness from two different places.
Right.
And what happened next is that as I started to wiggle out from underneath of the vehicle, because again, I wanted to get up and flee, there was a woman who came up. It seemed to me from out of nowhere, but laying on the ground on my back, I couldn't really see very much. So all of a sudden, though, there was this woman. She was, I don't know, probably in her late 20s, in sweatpants and a sweatshirt, and ran up and put her hands on my shoulder and said, her name was Anne, and that she was a nurse, and that she was going to keep me calm until the paramedics arrived, but that I was definitely not to move because, she didn't know the extent of my injuries. It was a blessing that she did that because, I didn't know it at the time. The extent of my injuries was absolutely amazing. I had a lot of trauma to my neck and spine. I think in total there were, I'm trying to think, it was like 9 or 10 vertebrae that were broken in multiple places.
Oh, wow.
And so when I broke my back and my neck both. My neck was actually almost as bad as my lower back. One vertebrae in my lower back was completely shattered. So if I had actually tried to stand, it's likely that I would have been a paraplegic immediately. My spine would have collapsed. So I owe her a huge debt. She at least saved my ability to walk, if not my life, because the injuries to my neck could have resulted in my spinal cord being severed at my neck as well. But she stayed with me, and then as the paramedics arrived very quickly, because I was the accident, luckily for me, happened really close to a fire station, so they were right, like a couple of blocks away. I'm not kidding. They were very close. And when they began to work on me is when my pain level went through the roof, and that's when both of my consciousnesses came back together in my body. So I kind of felt that hit, that my higher consciousness came swishing back into my body. And at that point on, I was just focused on really just survival at that point. And the nurse kind of disappeared through all this. So she stayed there until the paramedics came and then backed off. Only one other person saw her, and that was one of the police officers, and she refused to give her name to the officer. I don't understand why exactly, but she just didn't want to be written down as a witness. And after that, she really did disappear. She said she was going to come to the hospital with me because my family wouldn't be able to be there right away, most likely. So she was going to come to the hospital, but she actually didn't go. Well, at least physically. She kind of disappeared. The Boulder County District Attorney's Office tried to locate her for, I don't know, it was like 6 or 8 months because they wanted another witness, to the accident. And they knew they knew the name that I told her, that she told me. Mm-hmm. And so they looked all the area hospitals. In fact, I think they searched the entire Denver, Boulder, Fort Collins area to find out if they could find this woman, and they never did. So we're not really sure if she was truly a physical human being, or
I was just about to ask that.
She could have been a visitor who was there to help, I don't know. I can't say for sure either way. In retrospect, it doesn't matter, but she did do me a huge service. Mm-hmm. She came in, she saved my life, and then she was gone. So I have utmost gratitude for her, whoever she is, whatever she is.
Yeah. Your guardian angel.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and yeah, whatever respect she was, definitely that day she was. So I was brought to the hospital, which luckily for me was very close to where the accident was. That's where I found out the extent of injuries to my back. I also had many broken ribs. I had a broken collarbone, a cracked sternum, a cracked pelvis, and punctured and partially collapsed lung. And so it was, I had internal bleeding and other stuff. So it was a pretty severe impact for me. And the physicians decided that really the best way for me to heal, at least in my spine, would be to have surgery to install titanium rods so that, my back could heal. And they basically said, so you could heal, in a straight line and everything would be lined up, and that, I could still be mobile up and around as my back was healing up. So that surgery was scheduled for 3 days later. And, that's where the real near-death experience happened. And so for me, it was, 3 days of kind of just surgery. Waiting. Yeah. So I was basically in ICU laying on my back for 3 days, and then surgery came, the afternoon, evening of that third day after the accident.
Before we move on to that particular experience, we do have a question from the chat room. They were wondering why you were out of your body. What did things look like to you when you were having that dual consciousness?
It looked fairly normal. I didn't see any energy things. All I saw was the whole accident happening just from a different vantage point, one that I couldn't get, from the body's perspective. So I saw it as if I was a bystander, from a point of view, 75 feet off to the side, but everything looked fairly normal. I didn't see, any auras or glows or anything like that. Okay. Just that kind of outside perspective.
Right. Yeah. What did it feel dream-like? Like you were experiencing, like you were having a dream?
No, it was real. It felt very real to me.
Yeah.
That part of me that was outside. There wasn't anything really dreamlike about that. It was really, kind of the nightmare of the accident itself. That was kind of the dream. But
thanks for answering.
It was weird because the part that higher consciousness that I had felt more real than the physical body did in a way. And that's hard to explain. But so
it
that
was more
felt
clear
like reality.
For you? It was more of a seeing details more clearly?
Yeah. And just in a knowing, like a deeper knowing that I hadn't experienced before.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So going into surgery, that's when you actually had your near-death experience.
Right. Yeah. I had a reaction to the anesthesia, it was odd because I'd had surgeries before and had had that anesthesia before. But I hadn't had a reaction like this before. I hadn't had any kind of a reaction to the anesthetic. But this time what happened is as they started to inject me with the anesthesia, I later found out that I effectively coded. They don't call codes in the OR, but I flatlined and my heart rate stopped, my breathing stopped, my blood pressure went to zero for at least a minute, up to 2 minutes, somewhere in that time frame. But I didn't know that because I was already kind of off in La La Land. But what I experienced was I just woke up. You know, I woke up in this incredibly beautiful place, and it was outside, which was weird because I knew I was in the OR. I was standing up, which I knew I couldn't do because I was, my back was broken in 9 places at least. So I was standing up on this beautiful hillside in a meadow with flowers and trees, off in the distance, and off in the way distance there were mountains, and the sky didn't have a sun in it per se, but it was glowing like a silvery blue glow. Everything had a kind of an energy aura to it in a way, but not just outside. I mean, I could see energy flowing inside of everything. So it wasn't just like this outside, like the form of a tree. I could see the energy workings of the inside of the tree and how that tree was connected to all other trees and the ground and the flowers and, the air. It was this intricate like energy network that I could see. But it was so beautiful. But what really struck me was that it was peaceful. Like it wasn't just like quiet. And when I say it was peaceful, I mean peace. The feeling of peace was an energy that came through me, as was the feeling of love. It was an energy that came through me, almost as if, like on a cold winter's day, you might stand in front of a fireplace and kind of, feel the heat, coming off the fire, kind of warming your body. That's what this peace and love felt like. It was coming through me. And it was embracing me. I don't know how else to describe it, but that's what I felt was happening. It was a welcoming like I've never experienced before. And I at first thought I must be hallucinating because I knew I was in surgery.
Right.
But then I began to think, now here's the thing is when you're given anesthetic, the whole point of the anesthetic is to shut down your consciousness to the point where you can't dream, you can't hallucinate, you can't think, you can't do anything. I mean, that's the whole point of anesthesia. And they also give you an amnesia drug so that you can't remember if you do wake up. So I had all that stuff. I shouldn't have even been conscious at all, had my consciousness been stuck in my body. But here I was thinking about what was going on and remembering that I was in surgery. And then I started kind of putting 2 and 2 together, and I had the thought of, wow, I wonder if I died on the operating table. Because this isn't like anything I'd ever experienced in surgery before. But then I thought, if I did die, why am I here? Because I don't believe in any of this. I don't believe that this exists. So why am I here? And there was an answer which shocked me.
I was just about to ask, and what did you find out?
You don't expect an answer when you ask those questions internally in that realm, but I got the answer. And the answer was, and it wasn't really necessarily a voice, but it was an answer that came from all around me and within me at the same time. And the answer said, "This is your home. You are a part of me. You're my child. Welcome home." And it was like a welcoming beyond anything I'd ever experienced. And when I say those are words that I translated, because the words weren't English. It was more of feelings and visuals and love. But the gist of it was that this was my home. I was welcomed back. I was loved beyond my capacity to truly understand it. And, welcome back home. This is where your soul truly resides, is in a place like this. And I was blown away. I mean, I was weeping with remembering. I was remembering everything at that point. I was remembering the fact that this was my soul's home. This is our soul's home, not just mine, but everybody's. That we are loved, that we are a part of whatever that reality is. That is really truly what we are, and that's more real than this. This was the dream or the hallucination, if you will, and that is the reality. That spiritual state, whatever people call it, different things. English words are sometimes challenging to use because we wrap so much meaning up in a particular word, but so that I knew that spiritual realm, whatever it is, was my home, but that this was just the beginning. This was just like the entryway to it. It wasn't the whole thing. It was just the entryway to it.
So at that point, you really felt that you had passed.
I thought my body was done for at that point. I felt that this was the first step in the journey of the afterlife. That this was my first step in going to meet all those people in my life who had died before me. I thought, well, maybe I'll be in training for a while. And I thought that this was like my training room, but that I would continue to move on. And that those hopes were dashed quite quickly. There was a woman what looked like a woman, this being, I found out a little bit later, really didn't have a gender, but she wore a gender for me for this time. She was a being of light, a being of love. You can call her an angel if you want, but she was a light being who came to me and put on the guise of a woman so that I would feel more comfortable and that I would have someone I could relate to. But she said she would be my teacher for the things that I needed to learn, and in order to go back to my life on earth and make it one that was truly worth living. And when she said go back to your life on earth, I had a little bit of a reaction to that. I didn't want to come back.
Really?
It's so hard for people to understand, I think, and it even for me to understand sometimes, but that spiritual state was so welcoming and peaceful. I was so scared to go back to my broken body, and to all of the challenges I assumed that I would face, that I just wanted to stay there and continue my journey on into the rest of the spiritual realm. But she said, look, you've already agreed that you would go back and, continue your life. And I said, I don't remember that part. So she kind of showed me in sort of like in the, I guess almost like a video in the air in front of me, a visual of me kind of agreeing to some things that I wanted to do and accomplish during this lifetime that I was living on Earth. And one of them was, if I had this accident, that I would have an experience like this, an NDE. They don't really call it that, but that I'd have this experience of an NDE and then go back to my life. That was part of the plan, was for me to come back here. And once she showed that to me, I couldn't really argue. That was kind of like, oh yeah, okay, I remember that now. I can't argue the point at this juncture.
Now you have the knowing.
Yeah, now I have the knowing. Like,
were you
okay.
guys communicating in words, like through your voice, or was it more telepathically, like a thought?
That's a good question. It was really most of the time anyway, it was what I call beyond telepathic. It wasn't just mind to mind. It was heart to heart and soul to soul. So I could feel what she was feeling. She didn't have words that she would use. She would communicate via pictures and ideas and feelings and memories. And that would be the way that was most effective. There were times, though, that when it was like I wasn't getting the point or wasn't understanding what she was trying to communicate, then she would revert to English, which was kind of funny. It was obviously not her native tongue. It was a challenge for her to use words, but sometimes that's all I could understand. And so that's how most of the communication went, was that way. She also acted kind of as an intermediary for other beings of light who were part of my spiritual team, my spiritual circle, whatever you want to call it, who were my spiritual friends, but who didn't want to kind of clutter my experience, and so they just communicated to me through her, and so that's how I was able to communicate with a wider range of beings than just her. But she was like the funnel of that communication. It can be for me, in that I was still quasi-human at that point, so in hindsight, I knew that I wasn't fully cut off from the physical body. So I was still attached to humanity. I was still partly in my human body, and then partly not. And at least for me, when I was in that state, if I got too much of that communication, it was overwhelming. I was easily just like kind of blubbering. It was so much information, I couldn't deal with it, which is why it had to be funneled through one specific individual.
And I can imagine the time there was very short, although it probably felt longer than it was. So there was a lot of information that you were meant to receive during that time that had to be, condensed, if you will. Yeah.
If I were to put it into human terms, everything that I learned. So if I was to, take classes from you, AJ, and all of this stuff, it would probably take 2 or 3 months of full-time,
wow,
10 to 12 hours a day study to be able to grasp all of this information. And time there, you've probably heard this so many times. Time there, the passage of time doesn't really exist.
Right.
It doesn't. Time doesn't matter. So things take as long as they take. There is no passage. But here in the physical realm, so I was flatlined for a minute to a minute and a half. The whole surgery itself took, 2 hours. So at most, I was there for 2 hours. And that's kind of the equivalent, 2 hours here to 2 or 3 months there. But it was a lot of information. It was at times just overwhelming amounts of information. And I was able to have, I think the most profound part of it for me was a life review. I didn't know that's what it was, because I was an atheist. I didn't know all this terminology. But at one point, kind of in the middle of all this teaching, she brought me to a pond up in the mountains, and it was a pond that wasn't very big. It was 50, 60 feet across or something. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But it had a very dark look to it. It was kind of a mirror-like finish on it. You could see everything reflected in this pond. And she had me kneel down and touch the surface of the pond to see what would happen, when I touched the surface. And I knew what would happen. I knew that, there would be ripples that went out. And so she said, just do it anyway. Well, part of it, there was two parts of this. There was the teaching that came in about the ripples on the pond are like, the effects of the choices that we make in our lives, and how those choices that we make kind of flow outward from us in ways and to people that we don't even think of. So that was one piece of this teaching. It was a huge teaching that takes, many pages in my book, but just the power that we have in our choices and how those choices affect other people and ourselves. The other piece of this, though, was that as the ripples were kind of going across the pond, all of a sudden I could see in what the only equivalent here would be like little videos all in different places across the surface of this pond of me interacting with different people at different times in my life. And how my interactions affected them.
Oh. So not only the things that you were doing as an experience and receiving for yourself, but how they were also affecting others.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I could what was the most powerful part of it was not only was I remembering and feeling my feelings during each of those events, but I was also experiencing the event from the other person's perspective and feeling what they felt within that interaction with me. And that was the teaching moment, to be able to experience the pain that I caused someone else or the joy that I caused someone else. That was, to me, the greatest gift in that teaching, was learning how all connected we are, learning how my actions, my words affect other people, and that it's up to me to be conscious in each moment of how I interact with people so that I can leave that interaction in a good way, so in a positive way.
What a great experience for you to be able to have and bring back with you to this human experience.
Yeah, it was
profound.
It was. It certainly, in one fell swoop, taught me more about life and love and spirituality than anything else up to that point.
I can imagine. This is a really great place for us to stop and have a word from our sponsors. I don't want to have breaks with you. I just want to hear it all. Even after reading your book, I still want to hear it from you. You are listening to Soul Wanderings on KGRAradio.com. Let's take a quick break and we'll return shortly to wander with our guest, Nancy Rynes. Welcome back to Soul Wanderings, which is heard here on kgraradio.com, as well as many other platforms for your convenience, such as TuneIn Radio, TalkStream Live, and Spreaker, just to name a few. So wherever you are joining us from tonight, welcome. I'm happy to have you here wandering with us. And our guest, Nancy Rynes.
Of spiritual love. And how we all fit into that. We're a part of it. Here and now, right now, we're all a part of it. More kind of along those same lines, like you mentioned, each one of us are miracles. Treat yourself like one. So one of the things that was, I guess, disappointing or saddened my teacher there, and saddened my spiritual friends, my light being friends, was that oftentimes we don't treat ourselves very well. Obviously we don't treat each other very well in the global sense. There's a global challenge that we have in how we as humans treat each other. Mm-hmm. But more importantly, a lot of us on this planet have a hatred for our own selves. We don't like ourselves very much. And that's a problem. Part of what is disappointing is that we are all part of that divine creation. And how could we not love that divine creation, which then includes ourselves? So there's one of the big requests that I had from these beings of light and beings of love was to please ask everyone to begin the process of learning how to love and accept themselves. And that can be challenging for some people, but it's certainly a worthy activity to take on, especially now we're in the beginning of a new year. Begin to treat yourself well if you can, even if it's just in little ways each day. So another one kind of along with that is the earth and the entire universe are all miracles of that divine creation or spiritual creation. We're all in this together. It's all connected. All of us are connected to this earth. This is an incredibly beautiful place for us to live on and to learn from, and to experience whatever it is we're experiencing. So we've been asked to take better care of our home, this earth. One of the things that was hard for me to learn is this next principle, which is that we are more powerful than we imagine. We're a more powerful force for change in our lives and in the lives of the people around us than we can imagine. And to take that seriously, to learn how to begin to work with that each individually. Part of that is, again, learning to even just like yourself a little bit, but also understanding the power that you have in the words that you choose to use internally to yourself and externally to other people. That's a beginning step, learning how to use your words in a more positive, creative way, rather than a destructive way.
That's good stuff. That's good stuff.
Big stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Really big stuff. Again, each one of us, all of creation, we're all connected to each other spiritually. And so if you might think it's selfish to work on yourself and to learn how to love yourself, or, to take time out to learn a new skill or to learn more about spirituality. It's not wasted, because we're all connected. And when you lift yourself up, you spiritually also lift up the people around you as well. You're also an example. So when you take the time out to help yourself, you're also helping other people just by example. But we're all connected, all of us. We're all in this together, literally and figuratively. Another principle that was really tough for me at first was to stop being such a control freak.
Oh, yeah, that would be a good one for a lot of us.
Yeah. I held on to life with a tight-fisted grip, and in letting go a little bit, in learning how to let the flow happen, it allows room for that spiritual presence to work in our lives a little bit easier. If we try too hard, too often to control every little thing, oftentimes we can push away that which we want the most, because control is really, I believe, it's grounded in fear.
Absolutely.
And fear just drives away all that good stuff. So kind of, for me, there was a big process, about an 18-month process of learning how to let go of that control. One of my big things to learn right away, even within a day or so after my accident, was learning how to let others show love to me. I was all my life, so focused on helping other people or being there for other people, that I forgot that other people would want to help me. And we often can forget that. People want to help if you allow them. And that's how bonds are created, when there's that give and take, back and forth. Without that give and take, you can't forge a relationship. So I had to learn how. I was so staunchly independent that there were walls around me. And so I let those walls down and let other people help me out during that time after my accident. And that was a big step. It was a big change in my life right away.
I can empathize with that one on a grand scale. I'm learning to do the same thing. And that's one of the things that you shared that really resonated with me, because it was validation that it's okay for me to allow others to love me and help me in whatever that looked like.
Yeah, people, most people at their heart are really good people, and they want to help out, and they feel good when they can, help out in some way. And I'll give you an example, because I think this is such a beautiful example for the Boulder bicycling community in general, and for the people that I knew, that I worked with every day. So after the accident, most of the people that I worked with in the Boulder area, it was a scientific software company, or I think there were 120 people that worked there. Most of us were cyclists. I would say 90% of the people that worked there were active cyclists. It was a very outdoors-oriented team that I worked on. They were so affected by my accident because they all knew it could have been them, or it could have been their wife or husband, or someone in their family. And they, from what one of my friends said, they're beside themselves. They don't know what to do. They want to do something to help out, because it affected them so much. In fact, it was a week before my accident, another person in the Boulder cycling community was run over by a truck and killed. So this was like the second one in a week, and it really affected them. And so it was like a huge group of people in the Boulder cycling community got together, and I think it was like 6 to 8 weeks after my accident, I and my family did not have to cook. They bought food. They brought completed meals over for us to eat, so that I wouldn't have to try to, eat or, cook something, so that we would always have good, wholesome food there for us. In fact, there was usually, a couple of people that did a run to Whole Foods a couple of times a week. And then I had people come over that helped me reorganize my home, because I was now, when I came home 2 weeks after the accident, my mobility was pretty challenged and I needed a lot more space. So they helped, rearrange my home. One guy, the only thing he wasn't a good cook, but the only thing he could think of to do was to come over and like help clean and sharpen my knives. I just remember that he liked to come over and sharpen my knives.
Oh, they just wanted to help you.
Yeah, and at first I felt bad about that, but then I realized, with the insistence of one of my friends, it's a blessing for them to be able to help out. So then I just backed off and allowed, that love to flow back and forth, and it was beautiful. I mean, I'm right now I have tears in my eyes remembering all those beautiful folks in Boulder, because they really made it a lot easier for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, you think about how good it makes you feel when you're assisting someone else. Yeah. And why would we deny someone else of that same great feeling?
Exactly. Yeah. There's this, I don't know if it's everyone, but certainly a lot of people have this need to be independent and I can do it all myself. Well, you know what? It's probably easier. Life is easier if we let other people help us.
Right. And it doesn't make us stronger by any means.
No.
Mm-mm.
No.
You did make a comment in your book that these beings, our angels or whoever they may be, are sad for the way we choose not to love each other and ourselves.
Right.
That it is sad for them when they see us not allowing to be loved in that way or to even love ourselves.
It is because they know that it can be so much different here in this reality than what we have constructed for ourselves in this society. It doesn't have to be this way. And it's sad because we're on a bigger scale allowing it. Now, I know individual people like you and me and so many of your listeners are working to make a change that way, and that's great. That's exactly what we need to do. But what I mean is like on a global scale, there's so many people that have this resistance to connecting to each other heart to heart and soul to soul. And it doesn't need to be that way. So you and I you can think of us as kind of like on the beginning wave of a new way of being for the human race. And so many of us are on the beginning of this wave, not just you and me, but there are many of us that are saying, look, we need to do this differently because this isn't working the way we're doing it now.
Right. You also brought up in your book the fear of sharing and pushing our egos aside.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a really amazing thing to share. We're so good at allowing our ego to take control.
And that can, at least in my past, that part of that way of being for me where my ego was in control was not a good way of being. Mm-hmm. And now there are some authors, some speakers who say you need to kill your ego. And to me, I don't believe that's the right way for me to be. I've basically put my ego in the back seat and my soul is in the driver's seat now. And that's the way that I prefer to look at it. And that's why this calm has come over me that we talked about earlier. When the soul is in the driver's seat, when the soul is really in the present moment with you, with your ego, and your ego's kind of taking a back seat, life changes completely. You are now in the moment, you're aware in the moment, and you're living from a more peaceful, centered place. I think what the ego needs is, the ego takes over when it senses that your higher self, that higher awareness, isn't there taking control or isn't in the driver's seat. But the ego is kind of like a fearful little kid, and doesn't really know how to play nice in the sandbox. It doesn't know how to get to where it wants to go, so it's afraid all the time. But in the absence of your higher self being present in the present moment, that ego will take over, because something needs to be there to fill the void, right? In the driver's seat.
Yeah. If
you can bring your higher awareness into the moment, into the life's driver's seat, then the ego can relax and go sit in the back seat where it belongs and just enjoy the view. While your soul is kind of like, I got this. This is okay. I'm in the moment. I'm aware. I'm present. Everything is cool.
Well, if you were to look at your soul as the light and your ego as the dark, there's balance in having both.
Right.
But knowing which one takes the driver's seat. What did you say?
Yeah, there are some times when, the ego, fear is not necessarily always a bad thing. Sometimes, if, for example, if you're, I'll just use this example, if you're walking down, let's say, a dark street in New York City or Chicago or LA or something, and you get a prickle of fear up your spine, there may be a good reason for that. That your ego, that ego awareness, that body awareness is saying, hey, something's happening here. So in those instances, it's okay to pay attention to that, to listen to it, to find out what information is there, what you need to pay attention to, what you need to glean from that, and then continue on. It is a balance. For me, I think my ego was just so driven for so long that it likes to relax now.
On vacation.
It's on vacation
further notice.
For the most part. I draw on it once in a while. Like if I need to be present at an art opening for my art, it's helpful to draw on some of that ego consciousness when I'm up in front of an audience. But for the most part, it's enjoying the view from the back seat.
It's a good place. It's a good place to be.
Yeah. It can still pipe in and talk whenever it needs to, but
for the most part, kick back. I'm taking control here.
Chill.
Yeah. That's good. We're going to take our very last break of the wandering. And when we get back, I know you still have a few things to share along those lines.
Yeah, I do.
I love it. Thank you. You guys are listening to Soul Wanderings here on kgraradio.com, and we will be right back. Welcome back to Soul Wanderings on KGRA Radio. I am AJ Rasmussen. Thank you to our sponsor, OnlineVibez.com. That's OnlineVibes.com. Vibes is your source for spiritual elevation and high vibing energy. Be sure to check out all that Vibes has to offer. And don't forget your coupon code KGRA at checkout for 15% off any purchase. Tonight we are and have been wandering with Nancy Rynes. Nancy had a near-death experience 5 years ago, almost to the very date.
Yeah.
5 years. That really isn't that long of a time, and so much you have done since then from your experience. So much you have manifested and created and changed in your own personal life.
When I look back at it like that, it is a lot to pack into 5 years.
Absolutely.
Don't worry about, you don't have to become this, ascetic off in a cave somewhere and be very serious about what you're studying as far as spirituality goes. You can if you want to. If that's your vibe, then, go for it. But you don't have to be that way. And part of what I came away with from my experience wasn't just these teachings. It was the absolute utter joy in just being, and being in communion with all that is, whether you call that God or divine presence or the universe, whatever you call that. There is so much joy and laughter and music. I mean, one of the things that I don't really think I talked about too much in the book was the joyful music that was there. And it's indescribable how much joy and love comes through in that. Some people call it angelic music. It isn't really just angelic music. It's just the music of the spheres, maybe, the music of the universe. There's so much joy and love and gratitude in it. And you and I, here on this planet, you and I can participate in that music just by going into that loving space, just by being grateful for what we have, by loving ourselves and loving others. Our hearts sing with the joy of connection to that divine love whenever we act in loving ways. And it is incredibly, incredibly beautiful to experience that. And it was the only downside, I would say, of having that experience especially of the music, is I'm sort of spoiled now. It's very difficult for me to listen to earthly music for any length of time because it sounds like noise. But it's clear as day. I just remember that music. I remember the joy that was there, the love, the play, the playful attitudes, the joking around. And when the time called for it, there was seriousness too. And a very solemn, sacred what I will call an a viewpoint. There were times when it was so very sacred, and what we were talking about was so very deep and profound. But it was all beautifully layered and wrapped up in happiness and love and joy as well. So that's kind of one of the other takeaways that I want people to come away with is try to live in a more contented way each and every day. And I know that some people out there listening to me right now are not in that place, and that's okay. That's so totally okay. But if you can, on a day-to-day basis, just take baby steps in bringing one little tidbit of happiness into your life or in the life of someone else. Because sometimes we can gain happiness, as you mentioned before, just by helping someone else. And I would encourage people to just try doing one of those things every day if they can.
Baby steps.
Baby steps. We don't have to have it all at once. The journey starts with one step, right? And
absolutely.
We can't, there's so many metaphors and ways of saying it, but you can't, it's oftentimes not easy to get to where you want to go in just one step. And, even with a near-death experience or any other, whatever profound spiritual experience, or whatever spiritual experience it is, that's what the way that I see it is. It's just an opening. It's a doorway opening. It isn't the be all and end all. And some people have said, well, you must be enlightened now that you've had an NDE. I'm like, no way in heck. That was just the beginning of the journey. That was the invitation. And it's taking me every day. Every day I practice. Mm-hmm. Every day I have, it's not a complicated spiritual practice, but every day I have a spiritual practice that I dedicate myself to. It doesn't take that long. I'm just consistent with it. But it takes time for it all to sink into this life. So instant enlightenment wasn't my deal. It's been 5 years of work. But it's been joyful work. It's been loving work. I've loved every moment of it. And that's what I wish for everybody else. I like how you called it an
invitation. I'm sorry, I thought you were done. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay.
But I like how you called it an invitation. Like, you didn't come out of having this experience and a spiritual. I'm losing my words. Honestly, I'm going to be very authentic with everyone. I have so many goosebumps on my body right now, and my words are not being used very well. But your experience, you just came out of it not being perfect. Like, we're all perfect and whole in our way, definitely. But you're not all knowing. You're still learning, and I like that about you. How you didn't come back and know it all. Do you know what I'm saying? Because there have been some people who I have heard their stories, and they come and they're like, I learned this, and so I know all of this. And you just look at your experience with so much love and gratitude and the desire to learn and be more because of it. And I admire that about you.
Well, to me, that's authentic. I mean, I know when I came back immediately that my physical body would heal quickly, and it did. Mm-hmm. But that the other changes would take time. And it takes time to really fully understand what it was that you learned. At least for me, mm-hmm. It took time for all of this to sink in, not just mentally, but also as my daily practice. And so the way that I look at my life now is that I live my life as much as I can as if it were my spiritual practice. So each moment is an opportunity to be loved, to be connected, to be joyful. But that's taken me a long time to get there, mm-hmm. It's taken practice to get there. But now I see that life itself is the spiritual practice.
And it always does come back to love.
It does.
People laugh at me. I say love is the answer when they ask me questions and want to know what should I do or what, whatever that looks like. And I say, what would love say? Because love is the answer.
Yeah.
You did bring up earlier that you had a shared death experience with your father, and you would get more into that after you shared your experience, your NDE experience. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Sure. So this happened a long time ago. This was, I have to think back now. So this was in 2000, actually. So, wow, long time ago. So he died in November of 2000, and I actually wasn't. I was at a distance of about, I don't know, a couple hundred miles away the moment that he passed. I was asleep, and my partner at the time was actually up. I think that night he wasn't sleeping very well. We both knew that the end was getting close for my dad, and neither one of us were sleeping very well. But I was able to get to sleep. And the moment that my dad died, I woke up. and I could see him in the room, and he was just there to basically say goodbye. And I felt the goodbye. I didn't hear a goodbye, but I felt the goodbye. And then I saw him disappear, kind of like behind a veil. And so, of course, I knew that the phone call that I then heard after he disappeared was, my brother calling me to say that he had died. But I already knew that he had died because I had seen him in my room. So we drove over to my parents' home. And now to give a little background to the story, my dad did some things in his life that he was not proud of, as in his, last months on this planet. He made a lot of amends to me and a lot of other people. But he was terrified of death, even up until the time, he died. He was absolutely terrified of death. He was a very staunch Catholic, but he was terrified that he wasn't good enough for God, in his words, that he would go to hell and burn in hell for the rest of eternity. So here was a man who was absolutely terrified to die. So I walked into the doorway of their home, and as soon as I opened up the door, I heard music. And it was that angelic song, that song of the universe, the song of heaven, or whatever you want to call it. I heard that. And it was so joyful and so loving. It was echoing through everything. Although the funny thing was that no one else could hear it. I turned to my partner and I said, "Do you hear that?" He's like, "No, I don't hear anything." And I thought that maybe my mom had put on some music or something, but I walked in and no, she hadn't turned any music on. She was, off in the back sobbing. She was in the back room sobbing, and my brother was crying. But I heard this joyful, it was just joy. That's all I can describe it. It was a joyful music, the same music that I heard for, during my NDE, my experience in the afterlife many years later. So it gave me a little bit of comfort, although at that time as an atheist, I had no idea what it was that I was hearing. I thought I was like freaking out or making all this stuff up, or, what in the heck is that? I hear this music. There shouldn't be joyful music playing because my dad just died, But it was pure joy. It was love. It was welcoming. And I believe it was exactly what he needed in order to transition out in a way that was safe for him, because he felt so bad and unworthy of universal love, of divine love. I felt that if he hadn't had that joyful music, he might have gotten stuck, and not moved on. But that's part of the shared death experience. I've heard this from many other people since. I didn't know what it was at the time. And other people have reported similar things when they're with loved ones who pass away. I had something similar happen with a friend of mine a couple years ago when he passed away from cancer. And it wasn't the angelic music, but I saw some of the beings that were helping him across. And, it's just, again, it's touching on that sacredness, a little bit of that universal sacredness, that divine sacredness that is really what, it gives us hope. It gives us that bigger sense that, we are really just one small little part of the puzzle here on this planet, but it's still an important part of the puzzle, Right. We're part of the grander universe. We're part of that greater love, of that divine love. All of us are. And we get glimpses of it, if we're lucky, we get glimpses of it. And I feel, for me, it's a sacred gift to be able to share even just this little bit with people, to give them little glimpses of what I experienced, so that you understand there's more to life than just this. There's more to the greater universe than just this. There's a greater love for us all that we're all a part of.
It's so comforting to hear.
Yeah.
You had mentioned somewhere, and I can't remember where, but we are sad when someone leaves us, but on the other side, they're actually really happy and excited that we're coming home.
Yeah.
Do you think that joyful music is part of that celebration that they're experiencing on the other side?
I think it is. Yeah, it's a welcoming. It's a beautiful welcoming, And granted, even when we're here in this physical body, there's no separation to speak of, but there is a gulf of energy. And so it's harder for our souls when we're in this physical body to make that connection with our spiritual friends. There's just a gulf, a big difference in energy level. So when we transition out of this physical body and into spirit, it's like, oh, we're home. It's easier to talk. We're right there with people. It's like, I've got sisters who live 2,000 miles away from me, and while I talk to them on the phone from time to time, and that's wonderful, when we get together in person, it's awesome. And that's what this is like, right? So when your soul finally goes home, it's like, hey, you're finally home. Now we get to hang out again and, and laugh together and enjoy each other's company. And
so we are really reunited with our loved ones who have crossed as well.
Yeah. Yeah. If that's, I wasn't able to fully meet all of those beings that were part of my soul family or my soul team. I'm guessing my father was one of them. Probably my sister was one of them, and some other people who didn't incarnate into this life with me were there as well. And so, yeah, we are reunited with them in a very in kind of a real-time way. We're right there. It's easier to connect with them. Although from this side of things, we can still connect. It's just a little bit harder because the distance is further.
Yeah. And you did mention that you see beings. Was that something that you were able to do before this experience, or is that something that has began to happen for you since?
In hindsight, I will say that I experienced some very interesting things before my accident that I always just poo-pooed. I put it off to the side. I didn't think anything of it. Like, for example, I knew things about certain places when I had only visited them that first time. So I might be driving down a road I'd never driven down before in a place I didn't know anything about. And this actually happened with me with a friend in Colorado when I was in college. We were driving along a back road out in western Colorado, and I was basically half asleep in the passenger seat, and my friend was driving, and I screamed. I just woke up out of my sleep. I said, "You have to stop right now. Pull over, pull over. You've got to stop. There's something back in this canyon that we're supposed to go see." And this person looked at me like, "You must be out of your flipping gourd." Because my friend was a geologist too. And, he didn't believe in anything either. And he humored me. I think he was going to try to prove me wrong. So we walked back, got out of the car. We walked back there. Sure enough, there was a beautiful, beautiful rock art panel that was hidden from the road up in this canyon that you couldn't see from the road at all. There was no signage or anything. We had to kind of bushwhack back there to get at it. And he was starting to freak out, like, "How did you know that was there?" I said, "I don't know. I just knew it was there." So I had a lot of experiences like that before my accident, but I didn't necessarily see or communicate with beings before my accident. That kind of came after.
Mm.
And it's very intentional. It's not like I go around like seeing ghosts around me or anything like that, but it's a very intentional process, and I have to prepare myself for it. But I am able to do it if I have the intention to do it.
That's beautiful. We're quickly running out of time, and 2 hours I always feel is never long enough to have a great conversation. I always want more. That's my ego side, right? I just want more and more. But you brought up also one of these 12 lessons that creativity is our birthright. Right. And you yourself are a very creative person. And I want to make sure our wanderers know that you do create and you are an artist. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I have been an artist my entire life. Basically, even as a little kid, I would walk around the farm with the pen and paper in my hand and start drawing stuff. So I was always doing that. But really, it's only been since my accident that I would say my creativity it didn't just blossom. It was like an explosion of creativity that happened after my accident. And for whatever reason, I don't know why. Maybe it was just having that time and touching in on, that greater awareness. But since the accident, it has been an amazing creative journey for me. I can't stop. It's like I can't turn it off, which is great because I don't want to turn it off. But I can't not create. Not create. In fact, even when I'm not at my easel painting, I'm still painting in my head. I'm planning what I want to do the next time and where I can go with my art from here on out. But it's part of, as I was explaining to you, AJ, during one of the breaks, my painting process now, it's like meditation and prayer all wrapped up into one. And so when I go to the easel, it's 4 or 5 or 6 hours of a meditative prayer for me. It's utter communion with the greater awareness of the universe. It's like there are times when I paint where I don't even have an awareness that I'm painting. I'm just the brush through which something else is coming through. Mm-hmm. And I had that experience again over the weekend where I did a painting of a horse. That was like when I stood back at the end of the day, went, holy cow, where'd that come from?
So neat. I love that.
And yeah, it's just pure joy. But I have worked at the technique of it my whole life to be able to get to the point where I can go to the easel and things flow out from me. But for me, it's a prayer. It's a meditation. It's a communion of sorts for me to paint. And
so beautiful.
That people enjoy the creations too is icing on the cake. I love it.
It absolutely is. Oh, I wish we had more time. We're definitely out of it. But I do want people to be able to connect with you. So how could they do that?
So they can connect with me on my website. It's nancyrynes.com. That's NancyRynes.com. You can go there and get a link to where my art is located. You could sign up for my newsletter. I put out a newsletter about once a month or so. I don't do it very often, but I give out like little tips and tricks that I've learned on, a spiritual practice or upcoming workshops or things like that. So you can sign up for my newsletter there. You can get links to my book. My book is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or you can also just order it through my website as well. So that's kind of the central place, but I'm also on Facebook and Pinterest and Instagram as well.
Wonderful.
So you can look me up there by my last name, Rynes.
Oh, it's been such a blessing to have you here sharing your experience with us. I'm so thankful that we got to meet tonight.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure, and I'm definitely going to stop by your store when
I cannot
through.
Wait. And we'll be in Tucson at the same time, so who knows?
Yeah, great.
Thank you again, Nancy.
Thank you so much.
Next week, please join us as we will be wandering with Tom Hamblin. Tom will be wandering with us and sharing his personal journey from being intensely curious from an early age about what he considered the mysteries of life and how his journey has led him to understand that we are not alone in the universe and that life continues beyond the physical world. You have been listening to Soul Wanderings here on KGRAradio.com, your official contact for the best in alternative talk radio. You can find more about Soul Wanderings on soulwanderings.com and connect to all of the social media platforms there. I have enjoyed tonight, haven't you guys? It's been so amazing getting these messages, and I hope that it has inspired you, has allowed you to feel comforted and supported in knowing that you are not alone through this human journey. We are all divinely connected and loved. Thank you for another beautiful wandering. Happy day.